Láskavo prosimo, druzy moji. We've been studying grease pencil the last couple of weeks, and we've been quite studious about it, quite methodical. Where is this stroke going to get placed? How is this oriented in 3D space? How do you make materials, etc., etc.? It's a lot to take in, but the whole point of a tool like grease pencil is, as far as I'm concerned, to be quite improvisational with it, to be able to sketch something in 3D. And with that in mind, I'm going to try and improvise this entire lesson. So apologies if I go off script and get a bit wayward at times, but I want to go through the process behind this thing that you can see on screen at the moment, this little houseplant, something which was just sitting on a windowsill in my house. I thought, wow, that's good enough. It's sort of a bit boring, a bit pedestrian. Perfect. I really want to get into this idea of getting something from nothing, as it were. How to get inspired by just the most ordinary objects around us. Jodimo. Shift A, bring in a grease pencil, blank grease pencil object, that top option there. I am going to move my 3D cursor to the top of this plant pot here, drawing mode. Then I'm going to go into this top option here and use 3D cursor for the placement of my strokes. Now at the moment, it's just going to be using this default black material, but what's the point in that? It's a sort of yellowish green, isn't it? I mean, I could just select it from a screen reference, something like that, and maybe a little bit darker. That'll kind of do, greenish, isn't it? I'm just going to make sure strength is set to 1 there. I'll look at my alpha. Alpha's set to max there. We're not using pressure for our transparency. All right, so I'm just going to orbit around a little bit and put a few of these in here. That's plenty to start us off. Now, here's another setting for stroke placement that we didn't actually cover last time. So this is great. We can sort of learn through doing. I'm going to go for this stroke option here. And you can see that then opens up a few more options. What is this first one? All points here. Well, let's give it a go. So if I just start somewhere over here with a new stroke and then deliberately draw across my other strokes, let's see what that's done. You can see it's gone super wonky here. It's tried to go from stroke to stroke to stroke. Not what we're after in this case, so I'll just undo that. I think we want this first point, and that's to do with where I first put my brush. So if I put it on a stem like this, let's zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit better. Okay, and then that's just stuck it to that stroke there. So that's really good. You can just go to an existing stroke, start drawing, and it's probably going to stick to that original stroke. Now, these are our smaller secondary branches that we're making here rather than the main stem. So I'm already going to take the size down a little bit here and then just orbit around, just bung the odd stroke in here and there. I'm not really interested in making an exact representation per se of the photograph that we can see there. I'm only using it kind of almost like as an aid memoir. I'm not at all concerned about it looking accurate. And notice also that I'm trying to orbit as I draw these, so I get variation in the angles of these little secondary branches. Watch what happens if, let's just do a few here, all from the same camera view. 1, 2, 3. And then as I orbit around, you can see how parallel those things look, hey? And that's not looking all that natural. You rarely see parallel lines in nature. So let's undo those. And yeah, every time I draw a stroke, I'm going to change the camera angle a little bit. Let's stick another one in there. Okay, so we're starting to get a bit of a bushy looking base structure. All right, so the next step will be for us to make a fill material. We've been working only with strokes so far. So another material slot, switch the stroke off. I'm going to switch the fill on. Something like that, not too crazy. So let's try a little one here first of all. So I'm going to... All right, and if we orbit, yeah, that's kind of in the right place. And then once again, we're going to go around this thing, just putting them in here and there. Now, here's a key point. My attention was drawn to this by a keen viewer. Let's orbit over the top of this plant and we can see some of the weird paradox that you get 2D within a 3D space that I talked about in the last video. You can see that some of these leaves look as though they're sort of slicing through these branches. Now, last video, I said that probably the best solution for you is to use separate grease pencil objects so that Blender treats the space accordingly. But there is, in fact, a setting which you can use within your grease pencil object, and that is over here. If we go into the Data tab here, this green little curly whirly line, under Settings, Stroke Depth Order. Now let's keep our eye on this as we do it from over the top. At the moment, it's set to 2D layers, which I went over in detail last week. If we set that instead to 3D location, you can see that those stems snap into visibility. And as we move around, we can go underneath and you can see those leaves are no longer cutting through the stems. Much better way of working in 3D with grease pencil. All right, so once again, I'm gonna be paying attention to how these strokes are being placed as I do these lighter inner parts of the leaves. We have been working with this first point, but I want all of these lighter sections to stick to the leaves that I'm drawing on. So let's have a look. Let's take this leaf over here as an example. This one down here. Now at the moment I've got it set, as we've seen, to first point. I'll try and navigate so that I'm sort of on top of it like that. All right, so let's try drawing here. And as I orbit around, you can see that that's taken my viewpoint into account as it should. Only the first point where I started drawing is stuck to this leaf below. So I'll undo that. And let's try this other setting here, all points. Now, I'm thinking that that means that all of the points of my new stroke are going to try and stick to whatever stroke is underneath. So let's have a go. Let's have a go perhaps at a more accessible leaf. Okay, maybe this big one over here. So I'm going to start by drawing, and let's just kind of draw a messy blob here. And you can see with that sort of Z clashing there that it is trying to draw on that leaf. So let's just move around a little bit here and you can see, yes, that has stayed flat on top of that leaf, the existing leaf, despite the fact that I'm actually looking at it from the wrong camera angle, so to speak. I would encourage you not to care that there is this sort of stripiness here, there's Z clashing happening here. This is a very sloppy piece of work anyway. It's just to be expressive. So let's ignore the fact that that's happening and sort of go for the overall effect. Here's a good candidate. So let's draw another one here. Just a random sort of scribble there. Let's zoom back out. Yeah, that's fine, isn't it? It kind of looks like this reference. Now, if you're really finding this bandiness, this Z fighting annoying, the reason it's happening is because we did change the way that Blender is ordering these strokes to 3D location, which when we were wanting the stems to be behind the leaves made a lot of sense. Now we've gone back into a more painterly mode. I'm just using these splotches of paler green to add a little bit of detailing in an expressive way to these leaves. Now it's breaking down because Blender is seeing these two strokes being in exactly the same place in 3D space, exactly the same depth. Watch what happens if I change from this over in the Data tab, 3D location, depth order. Keep your eye on them as I switch back to 2D layers, and you can see snaps back into position, and that makes a lot more sense. So if you're making a slightly more complex object like this using grease pencil, you might need to split it into multiple objects as we've done previously. The stems, say, could be in one object, one grease pencil object, the leaves in another, and within that leaf object, well, then it's 2D layers that are king. You can work painterly. Now, as you can see, I've started putting some of these red lines in here, these little veins. I think they look a little bit heavy-handed, in fact, and there is a way that I can break them up just in the default settings over here under the material. I've got this stroke red dark selected. At the moment, the line type, as you can see over here on the right, is set to line. If I just switch it to dots, you can see that breaks it up nicely and kind of gives me more of the feel of this plant. It's not particularly accurate. They're sort of a bit all over the place, but it's more like it. It gives me more of the feel of it. And that's kind of all I'm interested in, really. So here is our finished result. I've done a little bit more work. I did end up separating various parts of this drawing out into separate objects, as I explained, just to make it read a little bit better, especially when you're doing an orbiting shot like this. And it is pretty remarkable that although we're only using essentially what are flat pieces of paper, really is 2.5D. Nevertheless, we really are getting this sense of some volume here, and it's so fast to work with. I'm not getting into polygons, I'm not getting into vertices and opening up the geometry nodes editor and the shader editor and so on. It really is bish bash bosh, let's just make something. I'm going to be doing a lot more of this stuff, so stay tuned. If you want to get deeper into 3D, check out my courses on 3dfromzero.com. There's a free one. Thanks for watching.